AITA for telling my husband the nanny is in charge? I want to preface this by saying that I am aware this is a very privileged issue, but I'm trying to get some perspective on my opinion. My husband and I have 3 kids that are 10 months, 3 years and 6 years old. My husband has a high-profile job and it means he's gone often. I work a regular 9 to 5. We originally used daycare for our oldest, but my middle was born right when the pandemic began. So we hired a nanny. She originally worked when I did, but by the time baby came around, I was very overwhelmed doing bath and bedtime on my own, on top of developing postpartum depression. After a breakdown, we spoke with the nanny and she agreed to adjust her hours as she's helping me with dinner, bath and bed. We've gotten close over the past 6 months doing this. In many ways, she's become like a third parent to the kids. She's so good with them. We've created a routine that works well. I tend to the baby during bath and bed. She handles the older two. It's a nice rhythm and my mental health has gotten so much better. My husband isn't traveling all the time, but most nights, he isn't even home for dinner and bed. He will help me weekends he's home. But because he's gone so often, he's reluctant to be firm with the kids. There are times he's come home when our nanny is there. He tries to help her with bath and bed, but allows the boys to roughhouse, lets them break the routine, and it seriously throws them off and delays bedtime. My nanny shared with me she feels awkward. Obviously she doesn't want to undermine her employer, but it just makes her job harder. But my husband also doesn't want her to go home when he arrives, as he says he can't handle it alone. I told him if that's the case, then he needs to defer to the nanny and follow her lead. She knows our boys best and she has to deal with the aftermath when they don't listen and give her a hard time. My husband feels that she's just an employee and he's the dad. His salary does pay for her. However, I don't feel this is fair to her. I told him he either follows her lead for bed and bath or he doesn't help at all. He told me I'm allowing the nanny to take over and replace him. AITA? NTA. But my husband also doesn't want her to go home when he arrives, as he says he can't handle it alone. This is the crux of your situation. Horseplay and roughhousing are very important for your children's development. If dad wants to take over and play hee-haw, he can very well do that, that's great. But what he can't do is take over, create a mess, and then have the nanny come put out the fire. If the nanny is going to be taking care of business, we play by her rules. If dad is going to be taking care of business, then we can play by his. NTA. Former nanny here. I loved the family. I still do. And I think they're good parents. My only issues with working for them is that they didn't always respect my time. They'd pay me extra when they were late but wouldn't give me a heads up, and I was a college student and was drowning in homework and a second job after watching their kids for 3,040 hours per week. And the dad would come home and want to be the fun parent and ruin the routines. And then the next day, it's, why are the kids so cranky? Why didn't they do their extra study work? Why didn't they do their instrument practice? Oh, IDK. Maybe BC dad came home, told them they didn't have to do anything they complained for more than 5 seconds to him about. And then he delayed bedtime by almost 2 hours? Most kids need structure and routines and discipline. And fun dad is actually just guilty dad not thinking about what's best for the kids because he currently feels bad about not being home. NTA. As their dad, it is his job to make sure they are healthy and happy. And sticking to their routine is the best way of doing that. Aside from special occasions. Of course. Either he needs the nanny there or he doesn't. But he can't insist she stay and then make her job worse. I'm sure at his high-profile job he would immediately sack someone who interfered with his ability to competently perform his duties. If he wants to goof off with the kids, let him make time for them that isn't at bedtime. How willing is your husband to lose the nanny? Because that's the real problem. My husband feels that she's just an employee and he's the dad. Wow. Just wow. Nannies are employees, yes. But they straddle a very unique line because a good nanny is part of the children's family. If your husband consistently disrespects that, you will probably lose yours. So NTA if you stick up for her. NTA. Ignore the aggrieved men in the comments. If your husband wants to help with bedtime, then he needs to actually help with bedtime. Not make it harder than it needs to be. Or else he needs to do it alone and deal with the consequences of riling the boys up. NTA. He's trying to Disney dad his way out of his guilt over being a mainly absent parent. He needs to actually take responsibility for putting the kids to bed if he wants to disrupt the schedule. He's being very disingenuous by whining about being replaced by the nanny, but also refusing to let her go home because he doesn't want to handle his own children alone. He told me I'm allowing the nanny to take over and replace him. I mean, he's not wrong, but that's the situation. He's gone all the time for work. You and nanny are the primary parents in this situation. Maybe it's not the ideal situation, but that is the situation because of his job. He needs to come to terms with that instead of trying to assert his authority over her as the dad. Or he can change jobs to something that allows him to play a more active and present role in his kids' lives. NTA. He told me I'm allowing the nanny to take over and replace him. Welp, that's how it goes when you're never home. He doesn't even want to parent. He takes the kids for an hour at a time and gives them junk. Then he hands them back to you or your nanny. NTA. NTA. The nanny is the expert on these kids' bath and bedtime. She's been doing it. She knows what's going on. If he can't defer to her as the expert, he's undermining her to the kids and making her job harder. And if he wants to replace the nanny, he can handle it alone and deal with all that entails. NTA. In fact, as a former nanny myself, I greatly appreciate you sticking up for your nanny. However, if hubby wants to rough house with the boys before bed, then he should be allowed to do. But that means the nanny is done for the evening. He has to put the kids to bed on his own. A few nights of him doing it without help, and he'll quickly agree with the nanny. If he wants to be a parent, the least he could do is to learn about the kids' routines and which times are best for such types of games. What does he expect? That when he suddenly has time to be with the kids, then all rules don't apply and everyone has to just adapt to his schedule? No. Definitely NTA. NTA. Coming from a man with no kids. Your husband has chosen to work where works, and that means he has chosen to be involved with his kids as he is. If you have to pay someone to make up for him not being there and being a part of their growth, development, he should shut up and not hinder their growth, development. That's not even going into the gender role scenario they're being exposed to. Ask him how he would feel if the owner of his company came in and used his computer while he was trying to work, deleted half the files he was working on, and then gives the computer back and says, "Oops. You need to recreate everything that was deleted," 'cause that's essentially what he's doing to the nanny. I mean, the owner would be well within his rights to do what he wants with a company-owned computer, and to insist he do the work because he's the employee. But you're not gonna work very long for someone who disrespects your time and effort that way. My dad was in the military. He would be away for long periods of time and we would exist in a tight routine allowing mom to deal with her full-time job and all three of us, plus our activities, during my father's absence. The family ran like clockwork. Everyone understood their roles, responsibilities, and followed the rules. Then, Dad would come home. He'd upend everything with his jumping in to help, now that he's home. It invariably ended in tears, and usually from more than one set of eyes. He would get frustrated that we weren't responding to him the way he thought we should, even though we weren't accustomed to being parented by him. Mom would get upset because everything was more stressful with him home than with him away. All that to say how much I perfectly understand what you're describing. You are NTA. Your husband doesn't get to walk in to be dad randomly, without notice, and railroad the routine you guys have worked out. He cannot both claim not to be able to do it without the nanny and make it infinitely harder for her to be successful at her job. She's not there to teach him to be a father. She's there to tend to the needs of children. She is not responsible for allowing him to work out whatever guilt, ego issues he has for not spending time with his family on her time. NTA. You aren't having the nanny replace him. This actually has nothing to do with your nanny. You're simply asking him to co-parent with you. Since you're there more often, you know what works best. I'm not sure why he's having trouble respecting that. And you. This isn't about her, or even you or him. It's about what's best for your kids. They're still so young, and routines are so important. Their bodies benefit from knowing what's next on so many levels, and it makes it easier on anyone who's taking care of them. There's a time for playing with dad, or mom, or anyone else for that matter, and a time to stick to the routine. If he wants to be involved in the nightly routine, that's wonderful, but he needs to be a part of it, not the other way around. If he can't handle them when she isn't there, then he really does need to follow her lead. What else is he going to do? Take the kids' lead? So they can roughhouse to their heart's content, not get enough sleep and be a wreck at school the next day? If he's home on the weekends, let that be their playtime. You can deviate from the routine on the weekends. Being gone often is not an excuse to not be firm with your own kids. That's guilt parenting. He isn't a toy or a plaything, and he needs to get himself out of that mindset. He's responsible for bringing up 3 human beings, and if he wants them to be good, responsible people, he has to actively be a part of that when he's there. NTA. Your husband is, though, seeing the nanny as just an employee? Whilst this technically is true, he might want to think about how he and you would feel if she quit and you had to replace her. NTA. Routine is important, and if he's coming in and messing up the rhythm you guys have worked out, it's going to create issues. It sounds like your husband wants it both ways, and that doesn't work, as it is bound to confuse the kids and make problems. Leave dad, marry the nanny, live happily ever after. On the nights your hubby is home, trade off with the nanny and you help him with the 2 older kids. You can correct him in a way the nanny isn't comfortable doing. NTA. It's literally her job to keep the kids on a routine. If his interfering is getting in the way of that, then he is actually just wasting money hiring her. However, he is still their dad and probably wants to feel involved. Maybe instead of framing it as the nanny is in charge, frame it more like the nanny is more used to their routine, schedule, and he has to learn, adjust to it, and should follow her example for that.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic AITA is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.